At 15, I fell in love with my best friend. Josephine, or Jo as I called her, lived across the street from me. She moved in when we were both 10 or so, and we hit it off pretty quickly. If you thought of a tomboy, she would most likely be the image you got. You could even be forgiven for thinking she was a boy with a short ponytail from a distance. Few would call her stunning, but over time, I found myself seeing her in a different way than when we were younger and spent our time catching salamanders and crayfish in a stream. She loves sports, loves going on adventures, and there are few things she wouldn't try once. I loved her adventurous nature, one that I wished I had. She also had her troubles. Her mother left her father and her, which was why they moved into my town, a shitty little mountain town in Pennsylvania. As our friendship grew, I noticed that she was alone a lot of the time, spending hours in the woods behind her house while her father worked 2 jobs just to keep a roof over their head. She was very protective of that patch of woods. Even I wasn't allowed near there unless she said so. Everyone in that town had money troubles, but Jo and her dad were worse off by far. My parents even gave her some of the clothes I outgrew. And while times were tough, I learned later that she wasn't really that alone. A warm June day of my 15th year found us on the banks of the local river, watching its muddy brown water sparkle in the sunlight. We had spent the better part of an hour swinging off a rope into the middle of the river and swimming back. Our clothes were hung on branches as we laid on the rocks in our underwear, trying to dry some before riding home. I stole glances at her, and the image of her lying beside me, with her tan skin speckled with water and her black hair, stays with me still. She caught my look and gave me a raised eyebrow. "What's up?" She rose up on her elbows. "Nothing." I took a stone and skipped it out into the water. "What's next for today?" She sat up and pulled her knees to her chest. "Got plans this afternoon. You?" "Plans?" She was frowning when I looked over. "What you doing?" "Got a date." I felt my heart drop and splash in my gut. She couldn't meet my eyes, and I suspect she knew I had feelings for her then, but didn't want to acknowledge it. "Dave asked me out yesterday." I nodded as it was all I could manage. I felt like someone had sucker punched me. "Cool. If he gives you any shit, you let me know. I can take care of him if he gets out of line, but backup is always nice." She stood and pulled her t-shirt off the branch and slipped it on. "What are you gonna do?" "Probably go home and play some Super Nintendo. Nothing much to do around here on your own." "Sorry," she said while tying her wet hair into a ponytail. "For what? I'm more than capable of entertaining myself." "Aren't most boys?" "Wow, really? Really? That's low, Jo." "I'm just calling it like I see it. Anyway, I'll catch you later." She laughed and placed a hand to my head as she walked past me, and then went up the bank, disappearing into the brush and the short trees. I sat there for a long time, listening to the birds call across the gap of the river and the sound of fish bubbling up to the surface, and thought about how much of a dumbass I was. Finally, after ripping myself to shreds mentally, I got up to leave. The hair on the back of my neck perked up and a shiver ran across my spine. I stopped mid-turn and looked back at the river. The feeling of being washed is always uncomfortable, but when surrounded by trees that created heavy shadows in their depths, the feeling is far worse. The birds had stopped chirping too, and it felt like everything had gone still. I waited, my breath slow and my eyes clicking from side to side as I looked for the source of the feeling. Nothing. I saw nothing, but the feeling stayed with me as I trudged up the bank. It didn't leave until I reached the road and hopped on my bike. I rode home and spent the day inside playing video games. Jo didn't come around for a few days, and calling always got the answering machine. I decided to go over to her place, but knocking on the front door gave no answer. Their spare key was hidden in my house, but I didn't think it would be a good idea to just walk in. Still, I worried about her. As I walked back across the street, I noticed a group of 5 guys coming up the street, a soccer ball being kicked between them. One of them raised a hand to me. Joey. I didn't get along with most of the other guys in town, which is why I think Joe and I became friends so fast. But Joey was always cool with me. He tapped the ball back to the group and jogged over to me, his soccer cleats loud on the pavement. "Hey man," he said, his breath still light. He swallowed hard and wiped the sweat from his forehead. "Missed a great game this afternoon, man. It's like 90 degrees outside. How many passed out this time?" "Only 3. No, wait, 4. We brought a shit ton of water this time. You need to come play, man. You can be goalie." "I've done that before, Joey. Never again." He laughed and patted my shoulder. "It'll be different this time. Besides, we could use another player since Dave didn't show up." "He didn't?" "Nah, went over his house. Place is up for sale." Joey looked down the road and scratched the back of his head. He didn't mention anything about moving. "When did you last see him?" Joey thought for a moment and then cocked his head to the side. "A few days ago, I think. Talk shit about a date with somebody." He grinned. "Guess it went really south." I nodded and Joey went on his way. I decided to take a walk down the days to see for myself. Sure enough, the sign was out front and the place looked empty. The windows were covered over, and even from the front porch, I couldn't see much of anything. Something strange was going on, and I felt even more worried about Joe. Did she move too, without telling me? Did something happen on their date? Maybe they went into witness protection. That would be pretty cool, save for the whole not seeing her anymore part. I went home, trying to come to terms with the idea that I may have lost my best friend. That night something pelted off my bedroom window. I was awake, unable to sleep with a mind full of questions, and it startled me from my bed. I crept over to the window and peered down into the lake of the darkness below. Something moved down there, and another pebble whacked off the window. I opened it up and stuck my head out. "Who the hell is that?" "It's me," Joe whispered, and stepped closer to the house so the porch light could catch her thin frame. "Can you come out?" "Where have you been?" "Just come out. I'll tell you what I can." She stepped back into the darkness, and I went to search for a pair of pants and a clean shirt. After a few minutes of quiet sneaking, so as not to wake my parents, I stepped out into the misty summer evening and shivered at the chill. "Joe?" I started down the walkway, searching either side. She appeared from behind a tree and motioned to me. "You better explain to me what's going on. You witnessed a murder or something?" "What? What makes you think that?" She took my hand as she spoke and led me off into the road. Once there, she turned to me and pulled me into a tight hug. "God, I miss you." "Miss you too. So tell me why you disappeared." She released me and took a few steps back, looking almost sheepish. Not entirely. Something kind of big is going on, but I'm going to protect you. Don't worry." "Protect me? Joe, what are you talking about?" She stared at the ground and licked her lips. "Jeez, didn't think it would be this hard. Trust me, right? You trust me, right? Like, with your life? Joe, alright. Before you get all annoyed, just listen. Dave is gone. I know. I saw the for sale sign," I said and glanced back down the road. "What happened on that date of yours? He caught a feeling you killed him?" She laughed, but there was no humor in it. "No, he was a gentleman, but he wasn't what I wanted." She started to pace, her hands in the back pockets of her jeans. "I hope I didn't read this wrong. I'm still getting the hang of it. But there's something here, right? Between us, and it's more than friends, right? It's not just me that feels that, right?" I felt my mouth drop and found no words to say. A large part of me was sure I misheard her and so I stammered for a few seconds before she reached out and tapped my chin. "Just yes or no, that's all I need." I swallowed hard, amazed at how dry my throat felt and how hollow my lungs were. With a deep breath, I nodded and said, "Yes." She grinned, a look of happiness that I had never seen before. She moved to me, placed her hand on either side of my face, and kissed me. It was just as I expected my first kiss would be. Sloppy, wet, and amazing. I started to kiss her too, and soon after, she broke it off and took a step back. "You've got no idea how long I wanted to do that." "Oh, I think I got a good idea. Yeah," I said, and I opened my eyes to see her grinning at me. We stood silent in the night, the moonlight playing off us both. I had so many questions, but chose the most pressing one. "But if you feel this way, why date Dave?" Her lips tightened and thinned. If this is something we want, I need to get in good with my mom." "In good with your mom? What does that have to do with Dave? I thought your mom abandoned you and your dad." She sighed. "Should be trustful in relationships, that's what all the talk shows say." She seemed to say this more to herself than for my benefit. "I can't, not yet. Just trust me that you're safe in all that's going down, and that I'm doing it for us." "What are you doing?" I reached out for her, but she moved away and glanced to the tree line behind her house. "Joe? This has gone too long already. I just wanted you to know that I'm okay. In a few days I'll come by and we can really talk." She moved toward me again and gave me a quick peck on the cheek before running off to her house. It was days later that I started to notice something. A lot of homes are going up for sale, and a lot of guys that I used to hang around had strangely gone missing. The girls were still around and seemed just as confused as I as to why so many were moving. Joe's name kept showing up too, usually in connection with boys having a date or something with her. That part left me lost, not only because she seemed to be into me, but that so many guys would go out with her. Like I said, she was a tomboy, and I remember most of the guys would make fun of her looks behind her back. They never wanted anything to do with her before. In the end, 6 homes were left empty. The last one I saw while in the front seat of my mom's car on the way home from the store. As we passed, I noticed that the person putting up the sign was not just any random guy, but Joe's father. I realized then that I had no idea what her dad did, but it felt strange that her father was there. I started to fear exactly what Joe had going on. No one had any idea the families were moving, and no one could recall a moving truck or even seeing the families move stuff. It was like they just flat out disappeared from the face of the earth. What could do that? I wondered a lot those few days, and wondered even more when I realized I was the last boy of my age around. Even Joey had gone. Almost a week passed since I saw Joe that night. Then one day, there was a knock on the back door where my family had a little rec room. It was where my gaming stuff was and a lot of my old toys. I was there working my way through Final Fantasy II as it had been raining all day. I hit pause and got up. Through the windows I could see Joe, drenched and looking tried and worried. When I opened the door, she came in quickly and pulled me into another hug, soaking me. "Jesus, Joe!" I shuddered as the cold water shocked me. She pulled away, grinning wide. "It's finished. You're safe now." "Safe? Have you seen what's been going on? Everyone is moving out of here. Joey was gone yesterday. Not a word, and then I see your dad out there putting a for sale sign in the front yard. When did he start selling homes?" "A few months ago. He finally got his license." "What has been going on? You know why everyone is leaving, don't you?" She nodded, a solemn expression come over her. "I do, yeah. If there was another way, I'd have done it." "What have you done?" "It's Mom. I told her about my feelings for you and she said she wasn't happy, to say the least." I pulled her to sit with me on the broken and worn couch. When did your mom show up?
She's never really been gone.
She started to fuss with the edge of her jacket.
She's not a normal woman, and I have to do a few things for her to get her blessing. My dad is okay with me and you, but she didn't like it as she had her own plans. So, I've done as she asked, and she has one more request. Will you come with me? If you do, you'll have your answers.
She was my best friend, the love of my life. How could I say no? Fear and anxiety were getting a good hold of me by then, but I'd do almost anything for Joe. So, I stood and she did the same. She led the way across the street to her house while the rain slowed to just a patter on the pavement. I thought we were going inside, but she continued on down the driveway and then cut through the backyard into the trees. She paused outside for me to catch up and then took my hand. We stepped in together. A few yards in, I noticed a smell. Woods tend to smell different in wet weather, but this wasn't anything like that. The smell could only be described as putrid. I glanced around our surroundings, expecting to see a swamp or something of that sort. There were none, and the further we went into the woods, the worse it got. I noticed a woman standing at the base of a very large tree that was covered in what looked like ropes. Around her were tables of varying heights and were made from bark-covered logs. Beyond her looked to be a cave that had been dug into the side of a small cliff. She was very tall, at least 2 feet higher than me. She reminded me of a bird in how she stood. She had her long fingers folded atop each other, and while I couldn't see her eyes due to the bushy brown hair, I knew she watched every move I made. Is that her? I asked, and Joe squeezed my hand. Don't run, no matter what. Why would I run? You'll want to, I know. Just don't let go of my hand. She dragged me forward and into the clearing where the tables were set up. The smell somehow was worse here. It didn't take much time to find the source. The tables were covered with fresh and dried blood, like someone had butchered 100 animals on them. Bones littered the floor and crackled under my feet as Joe pulled me to stand beside her and in front of the woman. This is my mom, Joe said, and held a hand out to the woman. Mom, you know who this is. I've done all you've asked. The woman took a few steps forward. I felt my breath catch deep in my lungs when I saw that her feet were backwards. Not broken, but turned completely around to face the other direction. Because of this, she walked almost like the bird she reminded me of. I started to back away, but Joe's grasp of my hand was iron-like. What's going on here? You're all right. I didn't tell you this before, but my mother has always been here. She couldn't really live with us though because, well, people call her kind Seguapa. What is that? Joe moved in front of me, blocking the view of her mother, and took both of my hands in hers. I didn't think you know what that was. She's basically a myth, an urban legend in the Dominican where she's from. She met my dad when he visited there years ago, and for the first time, she fell in love. Because of that, she didn't kill him, and instead they fell in love and moved back here. Kill him? I know, it's a lot to take in. She's not bad. No more so than a lion is bad. It's just her nature, and she can't survive on the food we eat. I dropped to the ground, my mind racing along with my heart. I felt sick and puked between my legs and onto the wilting brown leaves and yellow chips of bone. Joe came down with me and wiped the bile from my lips with her thumb. I think you know what she does eat. People. She smiled ruefully. Men mostly, and boys sometimes. I don't understand this. Are you like her? Would you hate me if I was? She shook her head, obviously not wanting an answer. I'm a bit like her. You see her as she is, just as you do with me. But many males, they see what they want to see. It's how she lures her food, like a Venus flytrap, I guess. People are
She ran her hands over my cheeks and shushed me. No, I didn't mean to say they were. She paused as if she was choosing her next words carefully. I love you. She wanted to come after you next, but I couldn't let that happen, so I did what she asked. I brought her enough food that she wouldn't even think of looking at you that way. The families that moved? Joe nodded slowly. I had no choice, not if I wanted to be with you, not if I didn't want you. I'm sorry. Joey too? Dave? Yes. I pinched myself in hopes of waking up, but no such luck. My best friend was still knelt in front of me, and a strange woman stood behind her. From the woman came 3 loud chirps. They sounded like an old woman trying to imitate a nightingale. No, he promised. He has to understand, and I'll answer any questions he has. The woman chirped again. He won't. Do you? Did you eat pieces of them? Joe shook her head hard. No. Like I said, I'm not exactly like her. I'm half human and half Seguapa. My feet are normal. I eat normally, but I can appear differently from person to person. Why? Why am I here? I wanted to cry, just to relieve the fear and insanity that felt like it would overwhelm me. She wanted to meet you. The woman chirped again and came around Joe. I looked up to find black eyes staring down at me. She wanted to make sure that you love me as much as I love you. If I don't? Joe stood silently. She looked down at me and bit her bottom lip. I know you do. Her mother reached out and placed a bony hand on top of my head and bent down in front of me, grinning to show pointed teeth. She stayed there just long enough for her pale face to be burnt into my nightmares, and then she stood. She went to a table and picked up what looked like a hunk of meat and tore off a piece and began to eat. So, are you satisfied? The woman munched thoughtfully and then gave a small chirp. Really? Can we go then? I don't think he could take much more right now. Joe didn't wait for an answer and instead came over and picked me up. We started out of the woods, Joe supporting me because my limbs didn't seem to work anymore. I think I passed out because the next thing I remember was being in my room. Joe laid beside me, asleep. It was the middle of the night, and as I laid there, I could hear night birds chatting away, or perhaps it was her mother. Joe and I married a few years later, after college. I never seen her mother again, but I swear she still watches us from time to time. I get the same feeling as I got that day on the riverbank. Joe is pregnant now, and I worry that the baby may take after her mother's side of the family. She has already been having cravings for meat, but no meat from the store seems to help, as she says it tastes disgusting and the baby gets upset. I don't know what to do. I'd hoped this was all behind us, like a bad nightmare. I've contacted her dad. He's still a realtor. I'll do anything for Joe. She's my best friend, the love of my life, and soon, the mother of our child.
She was always talking about them. Brennan's thick black hair, Aiden's bronze skin, Josh's sexy biceps, and Will's tight ass. I was so fucking sick of hearing about all these perfect guys that I never could be. That look in her shining blue eyes, that lust, the way she didn't even notice that I was gut-wrenchingly, agonizingly in love with her. You're my best friend, she told me often. I smiled and agreed, but I didn't want to be her friend. I wanted to be wanted. It took months of hard work, but I finally did it. I walked confidently up the stairs to her bedroom, smiling at my reflection in every mirror and pane of glass that I passed. It was amazing. The way a change in appearance changed my whole attitude. I turned on her light. She rubbed the sleep from her eyes for a moment before she focused on me and gasped. I don't blame her, I thought as I ran my fingers through Brandon's thick, black hair and admired the way Aiden's smooth, bronze skin glowed in the dim light. I really am a whole new man. Or, you know, the best pieces of several.
Valentine's Day 1998. I remember that day when I asked you to be my Valentine. That special bond I felt was going on between us was increasing, and I wanted to take it to the next level. I remember the look on your face, the happiness and excitement of the day we spent together drained from your face like running water down a plug hole. You said no. I loved you. You know I did, so why would you do this to me? Why? I remember when you walked away into the crowd of lovers. I sat on the bench, crying. I walked home on my own. No one was at home to comfort me after what you did. I remember waking up and looking at the pattern of cuts from last night. The blood on the carpet was still there from last night. The writing on my bedroom walls was still there. Why? It said, the writing said, all written in blood. I remember 2 weeks later, I saw you on the street with another man, much younger and better looking than me. The pain just grew and grew. Everything we'd done together had been thrown away by you. Every time we fucked, every time you told me you loved me and only me. I remember when I walked down that alley, and that gang of thugs mugged me and killed me. I died thinking of you, as the knife plunged into my chest, ending my life with the pain in my heart as the knife dug deeper into me. I could feel the life slipping away. The sheer pain was excruciating. I remember at my funeral, my friends and family were there. My mother was crying, my father was comforting her, and I looked around, but couldn't find you anywhere. When I died, it wasn't nice. All I could feel was searing pain through my body as if I was on fire. The pain was excruciating, and I only escaped because I didn't feel complete. I felt I needed something more, and I knew what it was. Revenge. I don't know how I escaped, but it involved lots of pain. When I came back, I felt like going straight home to everyone and saying hi and letting them know I survived. Then I realized no one could see me. So I just decided to kill the thugs that took my life away. I could still move things, but I was invisible. It was great fun, and I enjoyed it so much. The first one I went for ended up face down on the ground with a cracked skull and no scalp. He never knew what hit him. I used the same knife he used to kill me to carve his pretty little eyes out of their sockets. By this time, the other two assholes had backed into a corner. I ripped the first one's fingers off with my teeth. After that, I cut his eyes out, holding them in the same hand as the others. I knew what I was going to use them for. I was going to make you a necklace. With the second shuddering in pain on the floor and the third in tears, I felt the rush and became even more violent. I cracked his jaw with the first uppercut and dislodged his head from his body with the second. As with the others, I cut his eyes out with the same knife and kept the eyes and the knife for later use. I knew where I had to go next. I was going to his house, the one who took you from me. I was going to be less forgiving to him. When I first saw him, he knew something was wrong. He could sense me getting closer. I knocked him out with a single punch to the neck, taking out his airway and suffocating him till he collapsed. After that, I surgically cut a hole in his throat so he could breathe. I wanted this to last for as long as possible. He choked up blood and started to wake up. On the verge of death, it appeared he could see me. He knew who I was. But you were dead, he stuttered. He was so wrong. I cut his eyes out with him still screaming, then plunged the knife deep into his stomach, watching his intestines pour out onto the cold carpet floor. At least, I think it was cold. It was too drenched in blood for me to tell. I felt better after this, but not complete. I was still missing something. It was you. I needed you. I would never be complete without you. So I set off for your house, whistling to myself along the way. I was so happy for some reason. I knew nothing could stop me now. As I drew closer, I felt happier. You were surprised to see me. You cried a lot. I told you not to. You wouldn't stop and I had to tie you up. I got angry, I shouted, I cut you. I put the necklace I made on for you. And you just screamed louder. I plunged the murder weapon that was used on me into your eye. And from then on, we were tied together in permanent bond. No one could separate us now. I was happy. I could finally rest.
I knew I shouldn't read them. It was too soon. It was only a couple weeks ago I was clearing out my sister's house when I come across a bundle of love letters. My brother-in-law passed away a year ago, and within 10 months she followed. I was still grieving, and yet part of me wanted to know. Part of me needed this to understand my sister. We hadn't been particularly close in recent years. Life just got in the way. Maybe it was some kind of morbid voyeurism, but I wanted to understand her better, to understand how she felt in those months before her death. There must have been close to 100 letters. Her husband was obviously a prolific writer. Some were long, some barely more than short notes. Always, he loved her. How much he loved her. He spoke of a photo of her he kept in his wallet. A candid shot he'd taken of her in the garden, and how he looked at it every day during his lunch hour, because he missed her. He talked about the store he first saw her in, and how that day had changed their lives forever. Through his eyes I saw her in a way I never had before. Funny, graceful, and beautiful. Apparently she was forgetful too. He teased her about how often she would leave the house only to return 5 minutes later to check if she locked the door. I didn't know that about her. Growing up together, she had a memory like an elephant. I wonder how else age had changed her. He talked about how beautiful she looked on her 40th birthday, how stunned she looked when she walked into her surprise party and seen all her friends. I didn't even know that she had a surprise party. I guess no one had thought to put me on the guest list. I wonder if whoever organized it even knew she had a sister. Lee's letters must have been such a comfort to her, a reminder of a man who clearly adored her. I wonder how much she reread them. They look creased and folded. as though she had looked at them often. Some had smudges, I suspect caused by tears falling on the page. As I read, there was something nagging in the back of my mind, something not right, something that didn't make sense. I scanned quicker, my eyes leaping over the words. I love you, I love you. You looked beautiful, you're funny, you're this, you're that. Then it came to me, 40th birthday. Her 40th birthday had been last September. I had actually remembered to send her a card, a silly thing with a cartoon cat sitting next to a number 4, looking shocked and making the O in the 40 with its cartoon mouth. The letters were all signed A, her husband's initial, and I just assumed they were from him, but Alan was dead before her 40th birthday. As I scanned quicker, I got towards the end. There was something more frantic and urgent about the later ones. The last one, just a tiny scrap of paper, made my blood run cold. I think it's time we met. I felt sick. There had been nothing comforting in these letters from my sister at all. With trembling hands, I dialed the inspector who had been dealing with her murder. Hello? It's Amy's sister, Jo. I found some letters I think you need to see.
There's this painting my wife loves, called Death and Life, by Klimt. I don't know what she finds so fascinating about it. I made all the right noises when she showed me her beloved framed print when we were first dating, oohing and ahhing and making up some bullshit about warm and cold color schemes, and the specific choice of angles and lines. She was an artist. Our first few dates involved long walks through museums, starting in Picasso's Blue period and ending in heavy petting and blue balls. I took an art history course as an elective when I was finishing up my doctorate. I remembered enough of the lingo to charm my fantastically gorgeous future wife and lure her back to my stupidly filthy apartment. We're talking me as the foul bachelor frog, sitting on a lily pad made of empty takeout containers surrounded by a pond of enough unwashed clothes to keep a laundromat in business for a cool 6 months. I remember scrambling to find 2 of any sort of cup-like container for the bottle of wine we had brought back while she was in the bathroom. I rinsed out a couple of coffee mugs and ran into the bedroom to try to clean up the condom wrappers that had been sitting on my bedside table since 2003. On the bed, neatly laid out against the rest of the chaos, were my wife's dress, bra, and panties. She came out of the bathroom completely nude, aside from a pair of high heels, took the wine from me and took a swig straight from the bottle. I fell totally, completely, and irrevocably in love. I have no head for artistic things. I work in finance. I get creative with numbers, not paint, but I frickin' love her stuff. She's made a name for herself over the past few years. Critics call her the American Damien Hirst. One of her first exhibits was composed of a dozen oil paintings of rotting pastries, surrounding an actual cake filled with thousands of dead ladybugs being fed to a mummified tarantula dressed up as Little Miss Muffet. I have no idea what it meant, but it was sick, successful, and catered by Balthazar, so I ate about 20 croissants. They did not have bugs in them. I checked. She was amazing. She had the body of a Laker girl and the face of a Modigliani model, and still does. She's charming, charismatic, deep, the kind of person people flock to, want to be around constantly. She made love like she had something to prove. She had a twisted sense of humor. As soon as I hooked a job with enough figures to keep a girl like her satisfied the way she should be, I proposed. Bought her a historical brownstone in the city, with a garden full of roses and hardwood mahogany floors. And for the first few years, she seemed happy. We were the kind of couple you would see in New York Magazine and scoff at because they're just too damned lucky. But we had a rough spot, like all married couples do. She was still superficially the same woman I fell in love with, looked amazing. People always asked me when she was going to host the next dinner party. She still had an amazing eye for art. I knew, though. I knew she was miserable. I could see it. The misery. In the corner of her eyes and the curve of her mouth. It happened gradually. First it was the shower curtain. She bought 3 or 4 from a small boutique downtown, brought them home so we could choose one out together. We decided on one, pale blue, made of material that was impractical and way too expensive for a drapery in a bathroom. But we had the money, and it made her happy, so why the hell not? A few days later, I was shaving and realized she hadn't put the curtain up. It wasn't until about a month later that I caught a glimpse of it hanging up in her studio, cut to shreds and dyed till it was almost unrecognizable. I chose to ignore it, because I'd learned it's usually not the best course of action to call an artist out on their creative license, unless you want to start an all-out war with no discernible end. A year after that, though, I had no choice. She had been so on edge it was like she was standing on a razor. She usually had a show every 3-4 months or so. And if anything, she had too many ideas. The galleries always asked her to trim down her collections. When the year passed without so much as a single finished painting, I started to worry, both about her well-being and our bank account. We were extravagant spenders, and each of her shows would bring in a cool $20,000 that paid for a few months of European beaches and ski trips in Aspen. The final straw, though, is when she burned down the roses. It turned out she had finished dozens of projects over the year, but she had hated all of it, and had either destroyed or painted over everything. While I was at the office, she flew off the handle, doused about 16 canvases in lighter fluid, and set the yard on fire. When I got the call from the fire department, I rushed home to find her sitting in the back of the ambulance, covered in ashes, blonde hair singed at the ends. She was smoking a cigarette. I looked over the burnt flowers, skeletons of her paintings, the ruined limbs of broken sculptures, and asked her what happened and why. She took a drag of the cigarette and said, "It was mine to burn." She took big, fancy pictures of the inferno. A family of bunnies suffocated in the smoke. She had them stuffed and mounted in size order on a baking soda volcano, like the kind you see in middle school science fairs. She gathered up a few charred bits and pieces, wired it together, and made some warped, pained-looking kind of phoenix thing weighing in at 400 pounds, and easily over 8 feet high. She called the whole thing From the Ashes, and the reviews in the Times called it incendiary, her first foray into becoming a true artist. Someone bought the phoenix. I pity the person who wakes up every day and looks at that strange thing, suspended in constant agony. We were both drunk at a random, expensive, vaguely Dante's Inferno-themed bar in San Francisco, when I finally got a chance to ask her what was bothering her. We had been making dark jokes all night about the beautiful irony in her show and our current locale. At first, she vehemently denied anything was wrong, angrily pointing out that we had made 4 times as much off of her last show as anything before it, that it had more than covered the damages, that it had paid for the vacation we were on. I stayed silent. She tossed her newly cropped hair and looked like she was going to open up for a second. I saw her soft blue eyes filled with tears. Then she took a shot of whiskey from a glass that had a bull's head on it and smirked. "Well, for starters," she slurred, nonchalantly dangling the glass from the bull's nose ring, "I'm fairly certain I'm pregnant." She let the glass drop from her finger and it shattered on the floor as she slid out of her seat and stumbled to the exit. I sat there for a while and drank more, feeling furious, confused, and miserable. I remembered her face when she showed me that Klimt painting. I remembered how she wore glasses back then, and how she pushed them up the bridge of her nose when she smiled, as I talked about the frickin' warm and the frickin' cold colors and the frickin' angles and lines. We converted her studio into a nursery. Rather, I did, while she stayed in San Francisco and did God knows what with her artist friends. I had a landscaper come in and replant the roses. I worked a lot of overtime, drank myself to sleep while I skimmed through parenting books. She came back when she was almost full term. I came home from work one night to find sonogram pictures posted all over the fridge of two healthy-looking twins, big baby girls. I walked into our bedroom and saw her dead asleep on top of the covers, belly swollen, smelling faintly like pot and paint thinner. She had a rainbow of dried paint on her fingertips. I loosened my tie and walked to the nursery. She had been busy. The canary color I'd chosen was covered in a layer of translucent blue, and she had covered one wall in Klimt-esque patterns and curlicues. The creamy plush carpet was covered in paint splatters. She had worked furiously to finish. She had cut a swath from one of the new rose bushes and made a giant bouquet, shoving them so tightly in the vase that some of them had escaped and made their way from their perch on the changing table to the floor. She had scattered them in the bassinet on the windowsill. It was chaotic and beautiful. The next few years were peaceful for the most part. We bonded over raising the girls. Despite my wife's less than careful prenatal preparation, they were wickedly smart and beautiful. They both looked like her, with long curly blonde ringlets and blue eyes. Sometimes when I put them to bed, I wonder if any of my DNA was in them at all. They were like miniature versions of her. My wife agreed to see a psychiatrist for a little bit. She took some medication for a while. Xanax. Some mood stabilizers. Eventually, she and her doctor decided her crisis had been hormonal and temporary. We started having dinner parties again, soothing the gossip that had infected our social circles. She stopped painting and took up teaching at a university. She seemed content again, even happier than she was before. Every once in a while, I would catch a look in her eyes like repressed artillery fire, like she was ready to explode at any second. But it never lasted longer than a few seconds before they went back to the soft, cornflower blue I knew so well. And who doesn't get a little agitated every once in a while? I rose through the ranks at work. I loved the feeling of power that came with promotions. I loved my girls, and by God, I loved her. My crazy, disgusting, beautiful, hateful, and loving, extraordinary wife. Then came today. Today, I came home from work early. Today, my wife took the day off to be a chaperone on a class trip to MET. They were after her for months because of her expertise in the art world. They wanted the children to experience the culture in the most sophisticated way possible. I thought it was ridiculous. They were 1 to 3-year-olds in a private daycare. They saw more beauty in Cheerios than in Monet's water lilies. But they wore my wife down, and she was given a gaggle of toddlers and wide-eyed teachers to tour around the museum. I came home for lunch because I had forgotten my iPad that had notes on it for a presentation I was giving that night. I walked through the rose garden and noticed a tiny piece of sculpture left over from the Ashes exhibit from so long ago. It was half of a tiny bird. It had the kind of exquisite detail that my wife used to be so famous for. I was pretty sure it was an actual bird that she had cast in clay. I thought I could see a small piece of feather in one of the cracks. I idly wondered why I hadn't noticed it before. I went inside and poured myself a glass of orange juice. The fridge had pictures that my daughters drew. Happy, crooked stick figures that looked nothing like the beautiful horrors their mother used to churn out. I was happy about that. I hoped they would fall in love with numbers like I did. It was absolutely silent. I sipped the sweet citrus and enjoyed the nothingness. Then I thought I caught a vague scent of fresh paint in the air. Curious, I walked into the living room, and there was my wife, sitting on the leather couch with a bottle of wine, looking like an angel of death. She was covered head to toe with blue-gray body paint. with a special concentration underneath her eyes. She was wearing a revealing patchwork blue dress, covered in crosses of various shapes and sizes. Not a dress, I realized, but the shredded shower curtain from so many years ago. I could see most of her still perfect breasts, the curve of her waist. The bottle of wine was elongated and painted a strange shade of orange. The smell of paint was stronger in here, an overwhelming smell of lighter fluid, and something else I couldn't place. She had shaven her head. I stared at her for a while. Minutes, maybe an hour. Eventually, she took a swig of wine from the bottle, swirling it around in her mouth. I noticed paint, deep blues and even deeper reds, around her fingers. I sat down in the armchair across from her, unable to think of what exactly I wanted to ask her. Maybe because I knew. Maybe because I didn't want to know. I noticed a camera on the table between us. I went to pick it up and she rested her gray hand on mine before I could. Softly, gently, with all the familiarity of years of marriage. She opened her mouth to speak, soft pink lips made pallid by the paint. They were mine. And I've been sitting here, knowing what's behind the door to my daughter's room, with the Klimt wall we never repainted, knowing why my phone keeps ringing with calls from the school, from the NYPD, knowing why I couldn't find my sleeping pills last night, knowing what that smell is, seeing in my peripheral the red pool staining the carpet from underneath the door, the pile of clothes neatly folded next to my wife on the couch. I can picture that thick wire she used to fit all of her subjects where she wanted them. What a perfect, detailed recreation it must be, because she's so perfect. I see the phoenix in my mind's eye. I hope, when she flicks that cigarette she's about to light, that we both burn.
I still remember everything like it happened yesterday. There she was, in her white sundress, standing on the edge of the sidewalk. Gray eyes cutting through the night air and straight into me. Cars and trucks sweeping past behind her, with the wind carrying her hair every which way, like oak trees in a storm. That sad, sad smile. I had just dumped her. It would be funny, she said sadly. It would be funny if we woke up in a few years and realized something. Realized what? I say. If you realize that what you felt about me can't happen again, that this is what love is like, and you walked away from it, she says. And then she is there, and then she is walking backwards. What are you doing? I say. Into the traffic. We could have had a good life together, she says. And then she's everywhere. I met Gigi at a lonely time, when I just moved to Melbourne. I'd come from way out west, from a small town a few kilometers from Ballarat. I had high hopes and dreams about making it as a highly paid engineer, and I had to go out into the concrete jungle to pull it off. But it's hard to make friends when you're in the middle of the city. Everyone's far too rushed, far too involved in their own lives to be human. I spent a good few months living alone without talking to anyone. My coworkers was just that, coworkers. They were uninterested in mixing up their private and work lives. At some point, I had to admit to myself that I was lonely. And then she came along. She was a barista in one of those small laneway cafes scattered around the city. It was a beautiful day when I first saw her, with the floral bandana she used to hold her hair up. She was whipping up a couple of cappuccinos, her hands firmly set on the milk frother. How can I help you? She shouted over the loud hissing of the machine. A double espresso, thanks, I said as loudly as I could. What? She said. A double espresso, I said louder. She pushed a button to turn her frother off for a bit. called a doppio. I know, but my boss insists that I tell everyone that. Why? I asked her. A coffee is a coffee. Yeah, well, she said, stupid bosses are stupid bosses. An older man walked up behind her and pinched the skin on her waist hard, irritated look on his face. He must be the boss, I thought. She squealed and wriggled out of the way and gave him a wink that said, I'm kidding. Then she flicked the frother back on, and I could hear her laugh over the whirring of the machine. I started looking forward to visiting her after that. From then on, I walked up every day to her shop to steal a couple seconds of conversation before getting back to work. I slowly came to realize that she was hilarious and a little bit nuts, exactly my kind of girl. Slowly, she eventually got to know me as well. She found out about the place where I came from, and she often made jokes about me being some country bumpkin. She would make fun of my clothes at times and tell me to change my wardrobe. I would make fun of her for being overbearingly hipster. Eventually, I started coming over for lunch and afternoon tea as well. On one night, after a long day of work, I found myself having tea on the corner of her shop just before the time they closed. It was just us in a cafe. I was slumped down on one of the tables, trying to will myself to stand up and walk home. She was wiping down the counters, and then she suddenly stopped. Screw this, she said. Long day? I replied. Yep, she said. Let's chill for a while. I can't handle this shit. She plugged her phone into the aux cable leading to the cafe sound system. Slumped against one of the old wooden chairs scattered around the shop. She closed her eyes, draped a towel over her face, and tilted her hair back. We sat like that for a while. Hey, I have an idea, I said. I turned down a dimmer on the store's tracking lights and turned the volume up on the sound system. I took my lighter out and lit one of the candle stubs that lay around the tables. See? Isn't this calming? She threw her head back, laughing heartily. It seems more seductive than calming. Are you trying to be romantic, Carl? She said. Maybe I am, I said. Is it working? She curled her thin lips into a sly smile. Maybe, a little. It's corny as hell, but it's working a little. I linked in for a kiss. Things went really well after that, if only for a while. I ended up visiting her a little less as we spent some weekdays hanging out at her place. She had such a high energy job that she spent the bulk of her time at home watching TV and getting high. For a few weeks, I started to look forward to the times when I would visit her place with a tub of ice cream and caramel popcorn. I would knock on her door with a bunch of flowers. Jonquils were always her favorite, and she would greet me with a light slap on the face and that wry smile. On some days, I'd want to come over, and she'd tell me that she needed her space, and that was fine. I respected that, and I liked having time to myself as well. But on most nights, we'd just sit and slump over her couches, our heads too fucked from the weed, watching bad TV until we passed out. On one of those nights, we were lying down in her bed while we waited for an episode of The Blacklist to load. It had been a solid 10 minutes since it stopped playing, but time is on a stasis when you're on pot. I put an arm around her, and she cuddled up next to me. Are you happy like this? She suddenly whispered. Like what? I replied. Like this, not doing anything, just chilling out, being lazy, willing out the hours. Don't guys like to do shit all the time? Yeah, I do like doing stuff, but I like to do whatever makes me happy, and you know what? This is making me happy right now. She giggled and gave me a light bite on my chest. You're such a cheeseball, Jesus, it hurts me sometimes. I laughed, and we held each other for a while. I could hear the car zip by the road next to her house, tram bells ringing from a distance. The rapid clicking of a pedestrian walk sign, the mellow conversations of people walking by, muted sounds filtering through our open bedroom window. "You love me, don't you?" she suddenly said. "Like, I think it's a little obvious." "You could say that," I replied. "Well, I have baggage," she whispered. I could hear her voice almost snapping in half. "I have a lot of baggage. Baggage you don't know about yet. I just want to know if you're going to be cool with that." I kissed her on the forehead. "I think I'll be okay, Gigi. I think I can handle it." Love makes you do all sorts of crazy things. But one thing they don't tell you is that it makes you overestimate yourself. It's a bit like being drunk. You think you can make that jump if you tried hard enough. You think that maybe nothing can break you. You think you could maybe be invincible. But you're not. And I was like that for a while. Over time, she exposed a few parts of herself that she didn't let anyone see. It was the angry bouts of depression that hit me the most. She would go on for a whole day at times, slumped on the floor of her apartment, staring at the ceiling, almost catatonic with dread. She would play sad songs and curl up on the corner, and she wouldn't reply when I tried to talk to her. I would try to ply her with sweets and flowers, but she would sit there with her knees bent against her chin, unable to move. The next day, she would be fine and smiling. She would try to apologize in many different ways. She'd buy me lunch, ply me with sex, be a little more affectionate than usual. It was almost like she was buying her apologies with favors. "I'm so fucking sorry about yesterday. I was so lame," she'd say, her words reeking of something sad and desperate, but trying to mask it with a smile. "I'll make it up to you, okay?" "It's okay, Gigi," I'd say with a strained smile. "I can handle it. I told you I'd handle it." One time, she was driving her car in one of the outer suburbs after a party. I was a little drunk, and so was she, but she was in a better state to get us home. We were slowly cruising through the back streets while I was nodding off. Suddenly, I felt a sharp swerve and I felt the car driving off the road. I opened my eyes. The bumper of the car was planted against the fences of a house. Pots of flowers broken against the hood. Gigi opened her door and quickly ran outside, sprinting towards the front of the car. She had forgotten to put it on park. I watched as she bent towards the mess of the posies and dark soil, crying. She clutched the broken branches and leaves close to her face and whispered, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. She sobbed and sobbed, visible through the broken headlights. And I sat inside the car as I suddenly realized that she went to places where I couldn't reach her. I couldn't help her at all. I like to think that I did everything I could, but maybe I could have done more. There's an exhaustion that sets in when you're trying to pick somebody up from the ground. It's a kind of tiredness that makes you realize that caring has a cost. Making yourself responsible for someone else's happiness has a cost. But I tried. Maybe not my best, but I tried. She was fantastic when she was fine, but I sat with her for those long nights when she wasn't. When she was her old self, we'd hang out and sometimes I could pretend we were in that coffee shop again, bantering our way to get through the week. When she wasn't, I stayed awake with her, lying on the floor alongside her when she was too terrified of the world to move. Sometimes, I came to resent that. And in a bout of selfishness on my side, I came to resent it more. The small part of me that was tired and sleepless grew and grew, like a tumor on my side. And in a bout of crooked selfishness, I decided that I had to let go. I stilled myself with a couple whiskey shots from the bar next door. I had no illusions that what I was going to do was a good thing. I was abandoning someone. I was going to abandon her. I called her. She answered after 2 rings. Hey, Carl, she said with a smile in her voice. You going to come over tonight? I miss you. Gigi, we need to talk. Listen, I've been doing some thinking and I think I need a little space. I just need some time to recharge, maybe a bit, you know? Things have been a bit intense lately. You said you'd be here for me. I just need a bit of time is all. You say you can handle it, Carl. You say you can handle it. Muffled sobs on the other end. I'm sorry, G. Turns out that I can't. After all, I'm so fucking sorry. The line was live for a while. We were on opposite ends of the call, both saying nothing, just taking it all in. I forced myself to listen as she tried to muffle herself, stop herself from crying. In a way, it was like all the other times I laid on the floor with her. But this was the last time. Okay, I understand. But can you meet me one last time at least? You owe me my one last date. I said yes. And suddenly, there she was, in her white sundress, standing on the edge of the sidewalk. Gray eyes cutting through the night air and straight into me. Cars and trucks swept past behind her, with the wind carrying her hair every which way, like oak trees in a storm. That sad smile. It'll be funny, she said sadly. It'll be funny if you woke up in a few years and realized something. Realize what? I said. If you realize that what you felt about me can't happen again, that this is what love is like. You walked away from it, she said. And then she walked backwards. What are you doing? I said. Into the traffic. We could have had a good life together, she said. And then she was everywhere. The rest is a blur of siren lights and police cars and ambulances and interviews and questions and family and phone calls and whatever else. And it hurts to think about. So I let it take over me and I let myself go numb. I see myself walking forward, but I'm not there. She's not here. She's everywhere. And she's gone. And then I'm taking a copy of her apartment keys and I'm walking, but I don't want to. I do anyway. The lights are on, but no one's home and I'm on automatic, and a part of me tries to replay what just happened. But everything just shuts down, and I unlatch the doors to her apartment, the same door that I hung outside with and waited with ice cream and flowers, and her. The place smells like she still lives here, and in here is everything that she owns. I stop remembering the bad times, and I remember only the highlights with her in the coffee shop, and the candles, and her laugh, and the caramel popcorn and making fun of me. And it's a wave I'm trying to hold back because I don't want to feel it when it comes, but it's coming anyway. I walk towards her bedroom. Her sheets are a mess, and it's not until I see what's on the bed that it all comes down. I realize that life is broken now and will always be. It was a pregnancy test with 2 bright red lines.
My relationship has had a few problems. Before I say anything else, I want you to know that I love my girlfriend. When we first got together, it was heaven. It was a real whirlwind of romance, and within a couple of weeks, I knew that she was the woman that I wanted to spend the rest of my life with. Of course, it's not been without its problems. I mean, she's very good looking, and when she goes out, she would attract a lot of male attention. Our first big fight was after about 3 weeks. We were at a club when she bumped into an old friend. She spent half of the night talking to him. I can tell you that I was annoyed. When we got back to my house, we had a big fight. But after that, it was better for a while. She would actively avoid talking to other men. She's sweet like that. Then we went over to her work's Christmas party. One of the guys she works with was really annoying me. He was there with his wife, but he seemed way too interested in my girlfriend for my liking. When we got home, we had another fight, and that time, it got physical. I was just so mad. She should have been treating me with more respect. She didn't stay that night and went back to her place. The next day, I sent her loads of texts, but she was being stubborn and didn't reply for ages. I think maybe she was a bit ashamed of the way she behaved at the party. Anyway, she said that she needed some space, but I think she was just still a bit mad. I told her I couldn't live without her and threatened to kill myself. She said she thought she needed a break, but she agreed that we could still text. She loves me and doesn't want anything bad to happen to me. I tried going around her place, but she's always out. I think maybe that she was having car problems or something, because I would time it so that she wouldn't be at work, and her car would be there, but she was never in. I would try walking around the house and knocking on all the windows. I would peer in, but I never saw her. Sometimes during the night, when I was missing her, I would just sit outside her house in my car. It always made me feel better being close to her. I would text her all the time, but she's very busy and would hardly ever reply. In the end, I took to going to places where I knew that she would be. I saw her quite frequently in her local bar for a while. I don't know why she hangs around with the people she does. They would be quite rude to me. I guess she got fed up with them too because she stopped going. The last time I saw her, we had another fight. Honestly, our relationship is so volatile. I guess that just works for some couples though. Then she completely ignored my texts. A relationship doesn't work if you have no communication. I would frequently check her Facebook and see what she was up to online. I mean, I love her. I'm really interested in what she does. It makes me feel so sad though, seeing her do all these things without me. Then this weekend, I could not believe what I was reading. She was in a relationship with some guy. I know that she's annoyed with me, but that's just low. I didn't have any choice. I might have loved her, but I could not let her get away with making me look like a fool. I hacked into her Facebook and her blog. It was so easy. She's really lovely, but like most people, she's very naive about passwords. Her middle name with a 1 on the end. Not too difficult to guess. I got into her email too. Sent one to her boss saying that she resigned. I never wanted her working there anyway. Oh, and I sent some really amusing messages to all her rude little fucking friends on Facebook. Finally, that got her attention. She ragged on me, and boy was she mad. I didn't really mind though. At least we were talking again. It was just so good to hear her lovely voice. I woke up yesterday feeling great. I was so happy that our relationship was getting back on track. It occurred to me that we needed some quality time together though. I knew what time she was finishing work, and I picked her up. As she walked to her car, she wasn't as happy to see me as I thought she would be. Apparently, her boss had gotten the email, and she had to explain what happened. She was really embarrassed. I love her, but sometimes I don't think she sees the funny side of things. In the end, I had to shove her in the trunk of my car to get her to come with me. God, that sounds ridiculous saying that now. But you know, we all do crazy things in the heat of the moment. Anyway, when we got back, she was still furious, yelling at me and hitting me on the chest with her little fists. It was kind of adorable, and the sexual tension between us was palpable. I couldn't resist her, and I took her to bed. It was different than I remembered. She was really quiet. I guess this was just really intense for us both, being back together again. She even shed a few tears. After, I just held her in my arms and neither of us really spoke. I was just so happy. This morning was really nice. She wasn't mad at me at all. She was really quiet, but I think she was probably just tired. I asked her if she loved me, and she said of course she did, and that we would be together always. But she needed to go to work. It's a shame how real life interrupts these moments of bliss. But we gotta pay our bills. And I didn't mind letting her go, knowing that she would be back after work. I might go cook something nice for her when she comes in. Anyway, I just wanted to share my perspective. I think if you want something enough, you can make it happen. But relationships take work. I don't think any of these couples who have been together for years and years would tell you that it was all plain sailing. But I have to go now. I just saw a police car pull up outside my house and 2 officers get out, and they're coming up my path. I wonder what that could be about.
I'm writing to tell you how I really feel. You probably didn't notice, but for the longest time, I've always been there for you. I want you to know what I've done, and I hope by me opening up to you like this, you will hopefully feel the same way for me. And we can be happy together, forever. I remember when we were both 13, when you first transferred to my school. As soon as you walked in, I thought you were the most beautiful girl in the world. When your tranquil blue eyes crossed mine, even though it was for a brief moment, as you scanned across the strange faces in the class, I knew I wanted to be with you forever. But I was heartbroken straight away when you paired off by some other guy to show you around the school. You didn't really notice me much. You were always with your group of friends who were so different to mine. Who am I kidding? I never really had any friends. The one thing that got me through all those years of loneliness was watching you, admiring everything you did. The way you gracefully went through your day without faults simply left me in awe day in and day out. As the years went by, you seemed pretty popular with both the guys and the girls. You were sought after by all the popular guys in the whole school, even by the older ones, but you shrugged them off. The girls loved how you looked after yourself. You always had your makeup and hair perfect, which made you admired, but hated. It's sad, but it's human nature to get jealous, and we are all guilty of this crime. What they ended up doing, however, was far out of line. I saw as they pushed you when the teachers weren't looking. They would shove you into any nearby hard object, which more often than not was the wall. When you stumbled and slammed into the wall, the teachers would simply turn and say, "Watch where you're going, dear," and then go about their business, blissfully unaware of what actually happened. Witnessing it happening every other day burnt me up inside. Seeing you have this torment for being better than them, it was painful to watch every time it happened. I hoped it would die down, but it got worse. I saw when the bullies would knock your drink over when you least expected it, just because the most popular guy asked you out. I was there when they set your bag on fire in the woodworks class because I thought you were condescending when you tried to help them with their work. And I caught a glimpse of that one time when they actually threw you to the ground outside the school gates and kicked you until you cried, simply because you tried to tell the teacher about what they were doing. After that incident, they followed you home. Usually, they wouldn't do anything but yell abuse at you. The worst part was that you'd never know when they snapped and suddenly attack you when walking inches away from your back. It tore me apart to see the girl I love feel so vulnerable. I wanted to fix it. What I knew was that there were 3 main bullies that were consistent. I knew more, but they seemed to do it out of peer pressure. The main culprit was that narcissistic whore, Bethany. Beth was simply jealous of everything about you. All the things I mentioned that made you great burned her up inside. She used to be the center of attention. Oh my god, did she love it. All the guys wanted to be with her. All the girls wanted to be her. The only difference is that abused this attention for personal gain. She slept with most of the guys who showered her in gifts or had their mummy and daddy to pay for everything. She only hung around with the girls whom she deemed lower than her, and she did this so they wouldn't be a threat to her god complex. But slowly, over the years of you being in school, she eventually lost her reputation. By then, all the attention was on you. The second who had a disgruntled grudge against you was that asshole Chris. He asked you to the school's annual dance in front of both his friends and yours, and you simply rejected him like many others. But what made his instance different was that he ran off crying because he was publicly embarrassed. In school, that meant a lot. He denied liking you and lost all his friends and reputation, so he took his frustrations out on who he thought had caused all of it. You. The last person was Julie. She had it bad for you ever since the guy she liked always talked about how amazing you were, was not paying her any attention. Even after she performed some, well, let's say, desperate deeds for him. During the last week of school, I knew they had something special planned for you, so I took it into my own hands to deal with it. Because I love you, and I didn't want your last few days at school to be ruined. The first person I convinced to not mess with you anymore was Chris. Now, he was much stronger than me, being into all the school sports. Plus, the steroids meant that I wouldn't be able to take him in a simple one-on-one fight. But in the end, that would be his downfall. I knew where he kept his steroids. It wasn't hard to figure out since our school security and reputation was so low. There was no need in hiding it. I got his locker combination by simply saying I forgot mine, and the teacher gave me a list of everyone's combination. Yeah, that's right. They have no sense of security in this school. I cracked open his locker with ease, leaving no trace of it ever being opened. I found the next shot he was going to use and squirted a little bit out, then pulled the plunge back to where it was, leaving a considerably sized air bubble. I figured Chris is no doctor, nor does he have any clue how everything works altogether. He just injects himself and trains in the school gym. I bought a pass for the gym and pretended to train. He eventually came into the gym laughing hysterically with his new friends. Enjoy it while you can, it's not going to last long, said a thought that crept into my head. He went to his locker, and not long after, he came out dressed in his training attire with a determined look on his face. He was ready to start. He was fine for a while, but eventually slowed down. He had a puzzled look on his face as his body slowly gave up, and eventually the cardiac arrest settled in, and he was on the floor. People tried CPR, but there was no defibrillator around, since it was a school filled with teenagers. Who would expect a heart attack in a place like this? I smiled and walked out before the paramedics arrived. It was already too late for him. Working my way up the list, Julie was next. She was always jealous of the way every guy liked you. I silently slipped through her window without her noticing. I knew her parents were out, so if you made a noise, no one would immediately come to aid. I pounced on her while she was sleeping, pinning her down. I tied her hands to the bedpost and then her legs. I pulled out several jars from my bag, each one almost black. Upon closer inspection, you would see small movement. They were full of all the creepy crawlies that one would typically find in the bottom of anyone's garden. I took my time filling these up with every insect I could find. I wanted her to understand all the pain you must have felt all that time she was shouting abuse at you, hurting you, making you feel lower than you really are. I propped her mouth open with one of those plastic rings a dentist would use for a long procedure. I slowly poured each jar down her throat. Every time her screaming was muffled a little more by the buzzing and scuttling noises the bugs made as they adjusted to their new home. Tears streamed down her face as I repeated how all of this was for you. A few jars in and I could feel the bugs in her stomach, which was where I'd been sitting the whole time. By this time, she had pretty much passed out from the pain. When this happened, I'd wait, pour water on her face and slap her until she responded. For punishment, I'd take off the ring from her mouth and pour water down her throat, making her swallow all the insects and causing them to go into a frenzy of panic. Eventually, during the 5th jar, the pain of all the insects burrowing into her internal organs, plus all the internal bleeding, caused her to pass away. But not peaceably, of course. I saved the worst until last. I had something special planned for Bethany. She was by far the worst you. She made your life a living hell. And this was unacceptable. No one as perfect as you should have ever had the displeasure of knowing these people, so I carefully set the pieces and waited. One day, I got a head start. I skipped the last class, but no one noticed. Not even the teacher. This shows how much I was noticed in school. By this time, I had memorized her route home and waited in an archway. I knew she'd walk past this area every time. I waited and thought about what I was going to do, and how it was all for you. Although, I didn't have to think so much, because I already had it all planned out. When I caught sight of her, I grabbed her and pulled her to the ground. She was kicking and screaming, but in this point in her journey, no one was ever around. The archway led to an abandoned derelict church. I dragged her away from the path and to the building, so that no witness could intervene or find her body anytime soon. I did my routine of securing her arms and legs to a post, so I knew there wouldn't be that much of a struggle. After that, I gagged her, for I knew she'd make a lot of noise for what I was about to do. I slowly pulled out my knife, making sure she caught sight of its shiny glimmer. I placed the point of it on her lower leg and smiled as she reached to the sharp point of the blade. I slowly pushed down, making sure the wound was clean as it slowly slipped into her flesh. It took a while, but eventually the knife's handle was touching her skin. I took my time pulling it out, making sure the wound did not rupture with that easily recognized crimson liquid. That would have meant her death, and that would be too easy. As soon as the tip of the knife exited her body, I immediately wrapped the splint up in a bandage, applying enough pressure to cut the bleeding down to a minimum. I then placed the knife a little higher up on her leg, doing the same thing. I stared into her eyes as she hopelessly watched me do this over and over, all over her body. After every stab, I would say a remark about how you didn't deserve what she did to you. Eventually, her whole body was nothing but red bandages. She was barely conscious, so I slipped a final blow to her heart. I can imagine you're screaming about now. In fact, I know you'll be, and I'll be close enough to hear it. And by you stopping, I know you've gotten this far into my letter, so I'll start making my way in. It's pretty easy to get into your house after the first few times. You probably thought it was your parents who left this note in your room in the first place. No, it was me. Don't be afraid of the noise downstairs. It's only me. Put down the phone. I know by now you've got it in your hand, but I've cut the phone line. Don't bother calling your parents if you haven't done so already. I've already silenced them. You can stop your screaming now. I'm always right outside your door. Unlock it now, and soon it'll just be you and me, together forever. Lots of love, your secret admirer.